Kalam Podcast is made possible through listeners like you. If you enjoy listening to Kalam, please subscribe to the show in whatever podcast application you're listening to right now, and please give us a rating. It helps other people find out about us. And if you'd like to support the show with a small donation, consider signing up to Kalam Podcast on Patreon for just $3 a month. In addition to supporting the show, you'll gain access to lots of great bonus content. Go to patreon.com and search for Kalam Podcast, or go straight to patreon.com/Kalam Podcast. That's patreon.com/Kalam Podcast. Now, on to the show. Hello and welcome to the 7th installment of Kalam Digest, Kalam Podcast's weekly news summary. I'm joined by my co-host, Sam Khalid. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Edgar.
So our main story today is obviously the Israeli attack on Lebanon. I guess you could say the Lebanese war has begun, or the war on Lebanon has begun. But first, let's just go through some headlines from other parts of our region. Last week, the Al Jazeera office in Ramallah was closed down when Israeli military personnel raided it and kicked everyone out and said that they are shutting down that office. Grim news. Sam, do you have anything to say about that?
No, it's the same procedure as every other time. They claim that it's been used to broadcast terrorist propaganda, which comes as no surprise, perhaps. Around the world, there's been protests from journalist organizations and some media outlets, but it's been, as always, underreported and under-discussed, I would say, in the media. If anyone else would be doing this against a reputable TV station, it would be an uproar around the world.
Yeah, for sure.
Same procedure as in Gaza and then in Israel proper, and now in the West Bank.
Exactly, yeah. Like, we should point out that Israel shut down Al Jazeera from reporting within its borders earlier this year, and now it's not able to report even from the West Bank, from the occupied territory. So I guess going forward, Al Jazeera will only exist in Gaza, essentially, which is wild.
Essentially, yes. To the extent that they're not all killed, I mean, dozens of Al Jazeera reporters have been among the dead journalists, the killed journalists during the Gaza war.
Yeah. On to our next sort of headline story outside of Lebanon. Videos of Israeli school children harassing Palestinian kids have been shared on social media. I haven't seen these videos, but I've heard of them. Sam, what do they depict?
Well, I've forced myself to watch a couple of them, and it's deeply disturbing. It's just a symbol of a thoroughly racist society in which school children bully other school children for being of the wrong ethnicity, of the inferior ethnic, let's say, religious group.
Yeah.
And then they share this online as if it's, all in great fun, and they're egged on by grown-ups and media commentators in Israel, etc. As this is some part of an important contribution to the war effort. So I mean, it's something we haven't discussed a lot, and for obvious reasons, because it's their suffering is very much smaller than that of Palestinians in Gaza. But of course, the situation has been extremely harsh for Palestinian Arabs living inside Israel proper since the beginning of this war. Attacks, on them in general for just for being Arab, and of course, especially if they dare to speak out in any way to criticize the Israeli government or criticize the genocide.
Okay, on to our next story. 24 Palestinians at least have been killed in the last 24 hours in Gaza. Hundreds more were killed in the past week. So, yeah, I think it's important to keep reminding everyone that the war on Gaza and the bombardment has not stopped. If anything, it's sort of scaling up since the beginning of the Lebanese aggression, isn't it, Sam?
I think most definitely it's that's so. I think to some extent they're doing some things while we're focusing on the ongoing escalation in Lebanon. They're carrying out a certain kind of attacks that they haven't been or tried to not due to blatantly, openly in the last couple of weeks. So, for example, schools have been attacked repeatedly, and medics have been killed, etc.
Yeah.
And on the same note, of course, we have ongoing clashes in the West Bank. It's not letting up there either. So
Yeah.
overnight, Israeli forces raided at least four villages or camps in the West Bank. We have no numbers on deaths or injured Palestinians or Israelis, but probably a couple of dozens at least.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to our main story for today. Obviously, the ongoing war, I guess we could call it now. We should call it now in Lebanon. Um, Yesterday was the deadliest day in Lebanon since not just the 2006 war between Hezbollah and Israel, but the deadliest day since the civil war in Lebanon between 1975 and 1990. Almost
Well,
500 deaths have been counted. That number is likely to increase, and over 1,000 injuries and what's looking like tens of thousands of people being internally displaced as uh, people in complete panic try to leave the south of the country where the bombardment is most intense. But Israel is also bombing Dahia in southern Beirut, where Hezbollah have sort of popular base. So, what are your initial thoughts, Sam, now that this sort of, I mean, terrifying war has begun?
Well, it's hard to say how it's going to develop over time, but most likely they will have to make a ground invasion at some point. But so far, what we're seeing is just extensive aerial bombardments of the entire south of Lebanon and the Bekaa Valley in the east towards the border with Syria. And as you said, Dahia, the southern suburbs of Beirut, where I think 85% of the population is Shi'i Muslim, meaning it's a stronghold for Hezbollah and in general an area where they are have a lot of their base politically, let's say. I mean, as you said, it's the deadliest day. I didn't know that since the since the Civil War. I thought it was since 2006, but this is horrific. I mean, it's extensive attacks. As we've talked about before, they've managed to do precision strikes, actual precision strikes at certain times. But they're claiming that this is also, of course, precision strikes. But as we can see from especially from the Dahia scenes. They're blowing up entire apartment buildings,
Yeah.
etc., with tens of people killed. They're claiming that they're all Hezbollah, of course, but we know from Gaza that that is definitely not true.
We should probably add here that 35 children have been killed in these attacks, and just yesterday, you
Yeah,
know.
it's a day. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is also, I mean, it's not, it's, as you said, it's the deadliest day in Lebanon since the end of the civil war in 1990, and probably a couple of years before that because, it de-escalated towards the end. But uh, also, it's one of the deadliest days, I think, by far. I mean, it's possibly even the deadliest day since 7th of October
Yeah.
in terms of deaths in one single day. So it's not just that Israel is moving to a new front. It's they're also escalating in general. The killing is escalating.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's also. I mean, we discussed this over all our episodes on the digest. What does this mean for the region? What does it mean for geopolitics, etc.? I think it's important to see that we can now start to see like what is Israel actually claiming to be doing, and what does that mean for other actors in the region, such as Syria, Iran, basically every other country in the region. They've come out saying now on Israeli television, a government spokesperson said yesterday that the Litani River they consider that to be Israel's natural northern border. The Litani River runs basically right through Lebanon. It's a long way from the actual border between Israel and Lebanon, and it would also include a major part of the Bekaa Valley towards the east of Lebanon. So I mean also I think it was a minister in the Israeli government who said yesterday that they don't consider Lebanon to be an actual state,
Yeah.
that they can dismantle at will. Lebanon doesn't, they don't accept Lebanon as having any kind of territorial integrity. this is, it's it's horrific, of course, for the people being killed at the moment and forced to flee, but it's also, it's an absurd lack of respect for international,
Yeah,
the
Jesus.
basic groundwork of how to do international politics, even in a war, saying, look, we don't accept that your country exists.
Yeah,
Uh, this means, I think it has to mean over time that other states, even those who've been trying to reach some kind of accommodation with Israel, such as Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, will realize that this country is not, it's not a normal country.
yeah.
We can't really like deal with them in the way that they would respect us. And I think that's a very, very bold and very stupid, honestly, move on the Israeli side. It undermines their ability to strike long-term deals with any of their neighbors, which they were very close to doing successfully before the October 7th attack.
We should also mention that, I mean, so this government minister, I think he's a minor minister in the Israeli cabinet, but nonetheless is definitely a spokesperson for the government. But when he
Absolutely.
says that Lebanon is not a functional state, I mean, he has a point, not for himself,
Absolutely. I mean,
but
every Lebanese person would accept that.
yeah,
You know,
and I bring this up because I want to take a minute to like think about what this means practically for the civilians in southern Lebanon. You know, when Hezbollah, which it has been doing, and we'll get to that, when it hits Israel or when it targets Israel with rockets and drones and stuff like that, the Israeli government or the Israeli state is, you know, somewhat quite organized, at least when in comparison to the Lebanese one. So every single Israeli citizen is given, you know, like instructions and recommendations, and you know, you can shelter here, you can move
mm,
here, you know, we'll take care of you, um, and you know, almost zero deaths because they have the, you know, Iron Dome system in Lebanon. People are not either by Hezbollah or the Lebanese state. They're pretty much not given any help at all. They have to completely fend for themselves. So when
yeah,
Israel hits Lebanon, and when they hit Lebanon, they hit Lebanon. You know, clearly, nearly 500 deaths and over 1,000 injuries. You know, if you live in southern Lebanon, you're trying desperately to reach the north, and everyone's
yeah,
using the same highway. There's like one road. You know, it's a
yeah. There's
tiny
one
country.
highway in all
There's
of
one
Lebanon,
exactly,
basically.
and we've been seeing these photos of just complete congested highway that where
Mm,
almost nothing is moving. You know, imagine if someone needs to go to the hospital in that situation.
yeah,
It is complete chaos. And I was speaking to my good friend whose grandmother lives in Saida in what's Sidon in the south,
and-
and
yeah. Of
she's simply too old. She cannot move. She
course.
her she's frail and sick, and so she literally cannot move from the south to the north. So she's just at the mercy that, you know, the Israeli military won't target her building, or some Hezbollah person is just not by chance living close to her. You know,
Yeah,
it's a terrifying, terrifying, insecure situation.
yeah. I mean, as just to point this out, which I mean, of course, it's not just that not everyone is Hezbollah, in the terms of being militants.
Yeah.
The South Lebanon is it's not even like a, I mean, big parts of it is majority Shia, but it's also traditionally like an area where Druze people live and Christians live
Oh,
and
for sure.
Sunni Muslims live. It's not even like it's a regular country. It's not like a war zone permanently or anything. There's beautiful ordinary cities. People go about their ordinary lives, and of course they're on one of the worst most tense borders in the world, but still, I've been to Saida a lot and it's beautiful and it's just a place where people live and work and
Yeah.
go to school, and it's just like the idea that now they're going in and to like, our war is with Hezbollah, like no, it will not be that. It isn't. You will not be able to, not just because they don't care, but also because, a ground invasion, which will be coming, I'm certain of that, um, will not just, strike at Hezbollah people, or not even at Shia supporters of Hezbollah, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, sure.
Uh,
Because
and as as we all know, I mean, Lebanon I mean, it's incredibly fractured society in terms of sectarianism, something that was explicitly built up by the colonial powers to be kind of a way to rule and divide and rule the country, but it means that people are not on the same side on basically anything. But if anything, I mean, my guess would be that people in Lebanon, as apart from, there's a maybe 10-15% minority of really, really right-wing conservative Christians who are so strongly kind of anti-Arab, anti, they claim to be Phoenicians,
Yeah.
and anti-Muslim, that they would perhaps side with Israel. But apart from that, I think, a war on this scale will perhaps be the only thing that might unite most Lebanese
Yeah,
people.
yeah,
Not
exactly.
like behind Hezbollah in some deeper sense, but like as opposed to Israel.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's talk about the response from Hezbollah. They're striking back with rockets. There's been a lot of misinformation on this. I've pro Hezbollah channels on social media have been sharing videos claiming to be explosions in Israel proper, but really they're just. I mean, it's a Google search, Google image search
Yep.
away from realizing that that was like one big one was like an explosion on an oil tanker in Yemen.
Yep.
So the damage is I wouldn't say negligible, but there like Haifa has not been hit. Let's be real. There have been rocket strikes on villages around Haifa and in
Hmm.
the Galilee around Nazareth, but I don't
Yep.
think that there have been any casualties at all. Although property has been burning, there are fires and etc. And obviously we don't know everything. But I would
We know
recommend
very little.
we know,
That's the
yeah,
problem
we
on
know
this,
very
I think.
little because the Israeli media is not really reporting a lot on it. I think there's a lot of self censorship going on, but also, I mean, there is you. I would recommend anyone who wants to know exactly what is being hit to
Mm.
just go on a live UA map. It's just a map where every sort of strike, both in Israel and in Lebanon, is documented on a map with like a proper source and stuff like that. And you can also see where the Iron Dome has intercepted rockets, which is I think in most cases. And but then rockets fall and they don't really fall on anything in particular. Having said all
Yep.
that. This is not easy, for Israel. I mean, there are lots of rockets being sent into Israel proper, and it's not. I mean, this is not like no one's returned to northern Israel, of
No
the
one's
Israeli
returned so far. It will
population.
be a long time before they would be able to do that, of course. And that would, of course, as you spoke about, that would necessitate a ground invasion, a major ground invasion. As talking about the whether or not Hezbollah has actually managed to strike any targets inside Israel, I think you're right. I mean, they're obviously for propaganda purposes trying to inflate what they're doing. But on the other hand, as you said, we know for a fact also that the Israeli media are downplaying, and the Israeli spokespeople for the Israeli army are downplaying whatever hits actually occur. Uh, a couple of months back, I think, when I was watching, YouTube or Instagram videos of the strikes at an airbase, which were, demonstrably from this occasion. At the same time as I was reading the communique from the Israeli army saying that, as they always say, most were intercepted and the other ones hit in open areas.
Yeah,
No one. That's what they always say.
yeah,
This is a phrase they always use. So I mean, we have to be very careful both ways. I think to just be like, we don't know a lot about anything right now.
yeah,
The Lebanese health ministry seem to be very upfront about what's happening. I mean, they're very much also they're reporting as far as they are able to, I think, what is, who are fighters, who are
yeah,
civilians. It
yeah,
seems to be some kind of attempt to actually be careful with the reporting on their side, which is great. I guess it will soon be written off as the Hezbollah-controlled Lebanese health ministry or something, but
yeah,
whatever. But I think, I mean, we should just keep an eye on that. I mean, just to know that all media on the ground, or all media connected to any of the fighting parties here are
yeah,
will be deeply, uh, would be very problematic to actually have any faith in when there's this hidden tension. I think Israeli media is usually pretty honest and upfront, as when they're not in the situation of an acute kind of war siege
yeah,
situation. they're usually, they're fine with criticizing the government and the army and whatever. They have a culture of infighting.
Yeah.
But when it's actually, missile strikes are happening at the moment, I think that would, I'm pretty certain they do actually censor things. Either they're being censored or they're doing self-censorship.
Yeah, I think there's
Do
like a
way.
war sort of logic in the media in Israel for
Yeah, of
sure.
course. That would be the
So,
same thing in Sweden, it's nothing weird. It's just to
yeah,
say
yeah, yeah,
that
of course.
you trust the media right now.
So, Sam, what do you think? Like, if we speak strategy, what is Israel trying to achieve, and will they achieve it?
I think what they're trying to achieve is probably what they're saying. They say that they try to achieve. They try to strike at Hezbollah and make them, incapacitate them as a efficient fighting force. I think they're actually trying to do that, but then the problem arises. It's very, very hard to see how they would manage to do that. They failed miserably doing that to Hamas. They spent a year doing it now, almost, and they're still nowhere close to, of course they've hurt Hamas really, really bad, but they're not eliminated. And the minute they move out, the Hamas will come back, and
Yeah,
rebuild. Looking at that would actually be successful in Lebanon is very doubtful. I would say it's basically impossible. But also, even if you if you think that that's what they're trying to do, they would need to make a major ground invasion, at least up to the Litani River. Um, as we talked about, probably far more much further north, perhaps even into Beirut, at least South Beirut, which would leave insane strain on the Israeli army, which is we talked about last week, is already low on personnel, and they have and the Israeli economy is not doing great. They're running huge deficits. So, I mean, I honestly don't see how this is a good idea for them. It's not that they won't be able to kill, tens of thousands of people if they want to, including Hezbollah militants. But, Hezbollah is a huge organization. They have 50,000 people in arms, full-time fighters in peacetime. They've been basically in a state of war, or at least preparation now for almost a year. Their ordinary reserves are at least as big. So I would say probably Hezbollah has 100,000 people in arms at this moment. Meaning, like, even if they strike a lot of the leadership, it might cause chaos. It might cause confusion. But Israel is I mean, it's nowhere close to even like seriously hurting them as a fighting force on the ground as a guerrilla movement if there's a ground invasion, which I would say they have to do if they want to be anywhere close to realizing their objectives. And then we have to talk, of course. I mean, problematic thing with Israel is you have these two-tier situation where the last number I saw was 96% of the Jewish Israeli population support the war in Gaza. Not sure, maybe somewhat fewer support the war in Lebanon, but I would say like the support for the idea that we should strike at Hamas and Hezbollah is huge. But so I mean, so that is the Israeli society. What are the war aims of that Israeli society? I mean, the majority, the ordinary people in Israel, they're obviously pro-war, but are they on the same page as Netanyahu and his government? I'm
yeah.
not sure, because Netanyahu needs to make this war go on forever, basically. He knows that he will be perhaps be indicted on corruption charges basically the minute he steps out of power. So I mean, it's for him, it's also like a personal existential question to keep the war going and generalize it as much as possible. And I would say, I mean, it's hard to. I mean, honestly, I have a hard time understanding how this is a good idea for Israel. That it's a great idea for the right-wing government and the right-wing settler movement and for Netanyahu personally. Yes, absolutely. But for Israel as a society, I think this is a it's going to fail miserably.
Well, it certainly looks like a disaster waiting to happen since we're in it. But let's wrap there for now. Sam, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you, Edgar.